Well, good morning and welcome once again to ELEVENSES. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. This is my twice weekly live webcast and it is Sunday the 2nd June. And right at the moment, looking out the window here, it is a lovely blue sunny sky in London. So, what have I got for you in today's news? Well, unfortunately, we start with a sad story. A girl is fighting for her life after she was hit by a bullet during a drive-by shooting in Hackney. And a 15-year-old bike thief who killed a 7-year-old has been detained for 64 months. In Australia, a 15-year-old rider, a dirt bike champion, unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries after a crash in a race. Police, on the other hand, some good news, have returned some stolen bikes to German tourists at the Isle of Man TT. But Czech tourists, unfortunately, they've had their bikes stolen in Edinburgh, and at the moment, the police have no clue. MAG have vowed to fight the election on a move on motorcycling. We'll show you what was described online as a hilarious video of, well, I won't show you the video, but I'll tell you where you can find it. A biker towing a skater not too far from my front door, actually. At the TT, has that gone from a riding challenge to a spectator spectacle? We'll be asking that question as a big budget production company is over on the island filming this year's event, and Michael Dunlop has switched his bike, goes faster, and then wins the 26th TT of his career, equaling Joey's record. And we'll also have a look at the Voge 900 DSX, which is appearing in showrooms here in the UK any moment. And finally, today's in-depth item, we'll ask what Scotland is doing about bike crashes. And my answer to that in advance of the item is about the same as usual. So settle yourselves down, pull up a chair, and join me or stay with me for the next 40 odd minutes. Terry's looked in. Good morning, Terry. He's watching over on YouTube from New Zealand. Good to see you. And Kevin is looking in more locally here in the UK. So good to see you both. The items that I'm running this morning, we've just gone through those. So let's take those off. And don't forget, if you have a question about anything that I talk about, drop me a line. I do try to get back to you during the show if I possibly can. If not, I'll talk to you after the show via the comment stream. Yeah, I was having some problems getting the show set up on Facebook today. It was a fault over on the Facebook page. So anyway, here we go. On with the show. Now, the first thing I just want to say is that I have been coaching online, or if I'm more honest, really attempting to persuade people that coaching online really is a viable alternative to conventional on-road training for quite a few years now. I actually got an NVQ in online teaching back in the early 2000s. That's 20 odd years ago, and that course itself was delivered online. Now, a few months later, I actually developed and ran the first of my online coaching sessions. And I had some brave early adopters out there taking these courses, and I had one or two dropouts, but the vast majority of those who signed up stuck it out to the end, and they were very complimentary about what they'd learned. Now, unfortunately, as is the way of anything that's hosted in the cloud, there is a risk that the system that you're using will change their access rules or shut down altogether. And just as I was getting these online coaching courses going, getting some feedback between people about them, the hosting site I was using was promptly shut down, and promptly that obviously put me very much on the back foot. And try as I might, I couldn't find anything out there that could function adequately as a replacement. And I can't tell you how frustrating that was, because I'd put a considerable amount of time and effort into creating the materials for the course. I didn't actually lose the work, but I did obviously lose the ability to share that work with prospective trainees. So it was very disappointing. However, it has to be said that the internet has changed dramatically. There are now far more options to host online. Now, too many in some ways, to be fair, to check them all out and see how they work. Some are, I confess, eye-wateringly expensive. I was looking at one just the other day. It was $350 a month. No way I can fund that. Others are simplistic. They don't offer the features I require. And then there are others which have sort of limited, inexpensive plans. But I have found, I think, something that will work. And two, the big changes have been streaming software, which clearly works right here from my PC. You're sitting there watching me, and so you can see exactly how streaming software works. And the use of Zoom style meetings. People have begun to, thanks to COVID and working from home, many more of us have experience of meeting virtually, and people are beginning to realize that it can work for online coaching too. And a few people have actually tried it, and I do have some feedback from those people. And here is one article, or one review rather, that's been left on um, Google for me. And this is from Fergus Gilmore. And just in case you can't read it, it says, had an online consultation with Kevin this morning. I can't recommend it highly enough. I mentioned some topics in advance I'd like to cover, and he came to the call fully prepared and completely over delivered on my expectations. If you want to become a better rider, this is a modest investment that will provide a huge return. Not only that, but you can get a recording of the session so you can listen to it again. Well, actually, you can view it again because it is a video recording, but obviously you can listen to it if you want to. So just, to say there, I think that Fergus clearly got what he wanted out of the session. What he wanted to know about was mirror use and to improve his scanning. Now, the key point that I made about mirrors is that really they become important when we're slowing down or changing position along with blind spot checks, so we shouldn't ignore those either. The second was that because of the way the brain works, it's actually a pattern detector. We actually need to change our idea that scanning is a technique where we learn a search pattern, and that if we just search well, we'll see things using that search pattern, to an understanding that how the brain really works is to learn what we need to be aware of. So we actually have to teach ourselves what it is we're looking for. And I gave him some exercises that he could take away, do on the road himself. One of them simply involves standing on the street corner, basically, with a notebook. But that's how it works. We learn what we need to look for, then we learn the search pattern, and then what we'll find is that the objects that we actually need to be aware of kind of pop into consciousness. If we don't do it that way, we can scan high and wide, low and close, and to the sides, and use the mirrors too, and we'll still miss objects of interest, like a car half hidden behind a building that's about to pull into our path, or the hazard warning sign that's tucked away in a bit of an overgrown hedge that should have alerted us to the tight bend ahead. So if you want to find out more about online coaching, drop me a line. I'm here to help. All it will cost you to discover what I have to offer is a few minutes of your time. And all you have to do if you do book a course is let me know in advance what you want to discuss, whether it's a specific riding technique, whilst it's a particular problem that you want to fix, whether it's some knowledge that you think that you need to know. Let me know, then I can prepare the session for you. And all you have to do after that is show up at the right time. So anyway, that's online coaching. On with the weather for bikers. Now, right now, it's a gorgeous morning, as I said, in London, sunny, warm and dry, and much of the south of England is likely to stay the same, though a few showers could bubble up in places. Scotland and Northern Ireland, unfortunately, remain cloudy, showery rain for the far northwest later. Now, unfortunately, Monday sees a return to cloudy skies across England and Wales. It'll be sunny across much of Scotland, but with some drizzle and the odd shower in the far north. Now, later in the day, the cloud will break further south. Tuesday looks like a mixed bag. Band of rain moving southeast on a brisk wind. Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Northern England will be windy and will start wet, with the rain reaching Wales and the Midlands by the afternoon, and southern England by the evening. And behind the rain and the cloud, there will be brighter showery weather with the odd thunderstorm. That will steadily move south. Wednesday, it looks like more scattered thundery showers for Scotland, and they could even be wintry on the hills because we'll be having a northerly breeze. It'll be drier and sunnier elsewhere. Temperatures tend to remain average for the time of year, perhaps a bit cold in the north, but there are hints of some warmer, sunnier weather for mid-month, so stay tuned to find out how the weather's developing in the next show. Right, on to some news from around the world. And our first story, as I mentioned in the header to the show, unfortunately, a 9-year-old girl is in hospital in intensive care fighting for her life. 2 adults, I believe, remain in hospital after 3 people were shot during this, or 4 people, including the young girl, were shot during a ride-by shooting. Now, the girl had been eating inside the restaurant with her family when a gunman on a motorcycle pulled up outside a Turkish restaurant in Hackney in East London around 9 p.m. and fired half a dozen or so shots. The girl was unfortunately hit in the head. Now, the Met Police have released this photograph of the Ducati, which was used in the shooting. It had been reported stolen from Wembley in 2021, and at the time of the shooting, it was showing a registration number DP21 OXY. Now, the police are appealing to anybody who knows anything about this machine to come forward, and they do say that the plate may be a fake. Well, I'm sure they actually know whether it's a fake or not. Anyway, whatever. Now, 3 men were sitting outside the restaurant. They were taken to hospital for treatment. 1 has been released. 2 are said to be in stable condition, although 1 potentially faces life-changing injuries. The girl, described by the police as an innocent victim, remains in a critical condition. In another depressing story, a 15-year-old boy who hit and killed a 7-year-old girl who was playing in the street whilst riding a stolen motorcycle has been sentenced to 64 months detention. Katniss Seleznev, she died in hospital from the injuries she suffered after she was hit by a stolen Suzuki motorcycle. The rider failed to stop after the collision in Walsall, and he hid the bike in some bushes and set it alight. Now, a witness saw the motorcycle being ridden by this boy with his hood up and his face covered with a balaclava, and then saw the collision in her rear view mirror. She attempted to give CPR. While emergency services were called. Now, the boy has pleaded guilty to causing death by dangerous driving at Wolverhampton's Magistrates Court. That was back in April. He was 14 at the time when the collision happened in 27th of July last year, so he cannot be named due to his age. He was remanded for sentencing, and the court heard that the prosecution that the boy, a month before the fatal crash, he'd actually been convicted of taking a vehicle without the owner's consent, driving without insurance, and driving otherwise than in accordance with a license. And so that's why he has been detained for 64 months. That'll be in a young offenders institute, I imagine. And the third of our trio of sad stories to start the show, 15-year-old Australian off-road champion rider has died in hospital following a crash during a race last weekend. Amelia Coetzee, she was seriously injured, sadly, in an accident during the Central Coast Cup on Saturday, and she was rushed to a Sydney hospital and placed in intensive care, but died on Tuesday. Police said a 14-year-old boy had also suffered minor injuries in the crash, but did not require medical attention. Amelia had won at the Junior Girls State title in Victoria and the New South Wales Junior Track Championships late last year. And Motorcycling New South Wales issued a statement, and they said, "It's with profound sadness that we announce the tragic passing of rider Amelia Coetzee. Amelia was more than just a rising star in the dirt track world. She was a beacon of talent, determination, and sportsmanship. Her impressive achievements spoke volumes about her dedication to the sport. So don't forget, if you are enjoying the show, set a reminder. It goes out Wednesdays and Sundays at 11 a.m. It's almost always live. Very occasionally it'll be a recorded show, and even more rarely I do cancel a show when I have other things to do. So make a note of the date. Terry, or rather, Kevin tells Terry that he says YouTube is less hassle. Plus, you can fast forward if you join a bit late. That's true. And Sue's looked in. She says Facebook wouldn't let me in for some reason, so watch on YouTube. Yeah, I couldn't get the. I had problems this morning. The software was telling me the show couldn't be scheduled. Facebook appeared to have the show scheduled. I wasn't convinced by that, so up went the YouTube link to watch over there. So that's the easiest way sometimes when things aren't working with Facebook, which is a pain in the neck when it happens. Now, on a more cheerful note, 2 German tourists who were on their way to the TT races have been reunited with their motorcycles after they had to make the journey to the Isle of Man without them. The 2 bikes, a Honda and a Kawasaki, they were stolen in Liverpool while the 2 were on their way to the ferry terminal. They were taken overnight on Tuesday, 28th of May, but a call from a member of the public reporting suspicious activity allowed them to be recovered the same morning. It looks like it was actually that night, possibly. Anyway, the operation then shifted to getting the bikes to the Isle of Man for this pair of tourists, and that was apparently a joint effort between the city centre neighbourhood policing team, the roads policing unit, the force contact centre, presumably to find out who actually owned the bikes, and the DVLA's liaison manager, and that all came together. The bikes were transported across the Irish Sea thanks to the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company. They put the 2 bikes on a later ferry than they were booked on, and they assisted in reuniting the motorcycles with their owners once the ferry had docked. Now, unfortunately, a pair of tourists from the Czech Republic have not been so lucky. They'd planned to spend around 12 days travelling around Scotland, but their trip came to an end on their second night. Their first actually north of the border, as both machines were stolen overnight from the Parkview Hotel in Edinburgh. Now, they thought their bikes would be safe because the hotel has private parking and CCTV, but during the night of May the 20th, the bikes were stolen along with their equipment, their food, their clothes, and everything else they had left in their luggage. Now, Police Scotland officers have said the inquiries are ongoing. Now, this isn't the first report of tourist bikes being stolen from the Scottish capital. I know I've featured at least a couple here on Elevenses, and it seems to happen with fair regularity too from hotels with off-road parking. So I am sure that there are plenty of people out there who believe that these bikes are being targeted. Right, now, just before we go on to the next item, can I please ask you to do the usual thing? Click those buttons that are down somewhere on your screen. Support the YouTube channel, whether you're watching, I sort of say whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Obviously, you're not watching on Facebook today, but click the YouTube subscribe button. That always helps. And if you click the like to say you've liked the video, that's always great news too, because it helps other people find the content. And you can always tell your riding buddies about Elevenses too. Share the link. I'm sure they'll find something interesting in the show. Right, now moving on rapidly. Over to Motorcycle Action Group, MAG. Now, you probably know I write their safety column every couple of months in their magazine, but as a riders' rights organisation, they have a role to play in politics, and the latest idea that they have come up with is to task riders with getting creative in the general election campaign. So they're offering 2 things. First of all, a template letter that you can download and fill in yourself, and then prizes for the quote, most impactful and original approach to getting motorcycling issues into the public debate. But I honestly think that MAG's Director of Campaigns and Political Engagement, Colin Brown, he also hits the biggest issue facing bikers firmly on the head. He said, we know most riders feel apathetic towards politics, and who can blame them? Well, reminding bikers their voters on is one thing, but realistically, biking is not a hot political potato. It's one that's barely warm. So, yeah, will it make any difference? Probably not, which probably explains the reluctance of people to get involved on the political side of these things. Right, okay, so moving on rapidly. Something that was described as a hilarious video appeared online the other day. I'll just pop the link up for you. It was a London rollerblader getting a lift from a friendly motorcyclist by hanging onto the back of the machine. Now, the stunt happened actually in here in northwest London, not very far from me at all, as it happened. And after a search, I did find the clip. You can find it there, and you can see that the alleged rollerblade is actually wearing roller skates. But hey ho, I suppose it's wheels, isn't it? So it doesn't really matter. The video shows the unnamed biker pulling up next to the skater and saying, "Hey, listen, you've got your skates on. Come hold on the back. Do you want to do it?" The man agrees. The rider is heard to laugh to himself as he says, "This is going to be hilarious." Well, you can make your own judgment on that. What I didn't see mentioned in the article telling us how hilarious this was that the skater appeared to be clutching a can of drink. I have no idea what it was. I can't see the label on it. I just hope it wasn't something alcoholic. Right. Okay, Terry's made a comment here. He says we recently lost Simon Mead, the long-term CEO of Suzuki Motorcycles NZ, in the car accident. I didn't know that. Simon was a top bloke who would respond candidly and accurately to all sorts of inquiries. Yeah, he may well have been helpful when, of course, I came over in 2018 for the Shiny Side Up talks series, and having suggested that we toured around on motorcycles from venue to venue to give us some credibility rather than simply flying and using hire cars, Suzuki provided the bikes. So the gentleman, Simon Meadway, may well have had some impact on that decision to loan us the bikes. Very generous of Suzuki. So big thumbs up to them there. Right, now, as you probably know, the TT proper is underway after last week's practice sessions. And as I mentioned last week too, if you want to follow along, there is an inexpensive live stream that you can tap into. Now, the event is also being filmed by Box to Box Films, who are said to be behind some of the biggest sports docu-series. Now, I'll be honest, I'd never heard of them. That doesn't mean much. The project is being backed by Channing Tatum and Brad Pitt's own production companies, and the coverage is set to be billed as the greatest race on Earth. The press release from Tatum's company talks of quote, being drawn to characters who push the edge of what's possible, how the race is their Shangri-La, and how deeply honored everybody is to be able to tell the story of this legendary event and share this mythical sport. We dare anyone to find more awe-inspiring people or more breathtakingly vibrant world than the Isle of Man TT. Well, plenty of hyperbole there. And TT business manager Paul Phillips is almost as effusive. He says the project has the potential to be transformational for the event, with a huge potential and to wake up the world to the TT. But he points out the TT organisers themselves have actually no control over what the production company will come up with. And he says, quote, we have to take the view that they want to go on a certain trajectory with this, and they can only do that by amplifying the TT rather than hurting it. That's the safety net. There's a trust, as we've all seen the work they do. Well, it seems very trusting, actually. They could easily turn the show into something if there are completely different. It will depend on what happens at the TT this year. But me, I'm a little uneasy about the idea of turning the TT into a global phenomenon in the first place. Now, Phillips says what won't change is the on-track action itself. He says, quote, while people say the TT is changing, what doesn't change is the bike setting off down Bray Hill. He also says the TT has something money can't buy, but clearly, if there's enough cash on offer, there's a way in for a production company. And that means I do see the event changing, and I don't see that anybody could really deny this, because instead of it being a motorcycling challenge where the vast majority of the audience will actually be motorcyclists who at least have some concept of what motivates the riders to, go zip round the TT circuit and to have some idea of the risks too. The aim here is clearly to create a spectacle for the general paying public who don't ride motorcycles, something for them to ooh and ah at. Now, having been to the TT a couple of times personally, it is an unbelievable event to watch trackside, but increasingly with the coverage, it's reminding me of Roman arenas and gladiators. So I'll throw this one over to you. What do you think? I'd be interested to hear your views on the trajectory that the TT is following in terms of publicity. Now, anyway, talking TT, on Thursday morning, I heard that Michael Dunlop had jumped from third fastest in first qualifying for the Super Sport class at the Isle of Man TT to the quickest. Nothing too surprising about that, because he has been a dominant force at the races for a decade and a half now. What was surprising that he went no less than 16 seconds faster in the second session after switching to a completely different bike, not just a sort of a new model or new bike of the same model. He actually changed from the 3-cylinder Triumph 765 to a 4-cylinder Yamaha R6, and he was the only rider to put in an under 18-minute lap on the Yamaha. Now, it always takes me, I'll be perfectly honest, a few days to feel fully comfortable on a new machine. That Suzuki V-Strom, for example, that Suzuki New Zealand loaned us back in 2018, I didn't jump on that and feel immediately at home. It did take quite a while for me to think, okay, I know what this bike is now doing. So the fact that Dunlop can jump on a machine with completely different engine characteristics, presumably different handling too, and go even quicker is, it's beyond my comprehension. Anyway, it doesn't seem to bother him. He went out on the bike yesterday to win his 26th TT, which means he equals the record set by his uncle Joey, and a total of 26 wins is something that I honestly never thought would be equaled. So hats off to Michael Dunlop. Right, okay. And was there anything else I wanted to remind you? No, I'll go on with the next story then. I have to chuckle when I hear riders extolling the virtues of BMW motorcycles whilst telling everybody else who's listening why they wouldn't buy a Chinese motorcycle. So the only thing I can imagine is they've no idea that the Chinese motorcycle giant Longsin has actually been producing engines for BMW for almost 15 years. Now, they started supplying the BMW 650cc single-cylinder engine back in 2009, replacing the prior BMW Rotax design. In 2015, Longsin took on the complete manufacture of the C400 scooter series, and the company also builds the parallel twin engine, which found in the F800 and more recently in the F900 series of bikes. Now, Longsin are also behind the Voge brand. They build their own 650DS and 650DSX models around the same 650cc engine, the single that BMW use. And now the 895 parallel twin motor that they share with BMW has found its way into a brand new Voge 900 DSX twin, and this has now arrived in showrooms in the UK. So let me just show you what it is. There it is. That's a bit of a gloomy photograph, isn't it? Normally I remember to improve these visually so you can actually see what you're looking at. Anyway, as you can see, it's yet another adventure model. It did appear at the EICMA show in Milan last autumn. Somehow I missed that. It's the twin cylinder, as I explained, Euro 5, 8-valve double overhead cam, 270-degree crank. It puts out a pretty healthy 95 PS, 70 kilowatts. That's a little bit down on the BMW, I believe, at 8,250 RPM. So that's fairly revvy for a big twin. And torque is a fairly impressive 95 Newton meters or 70.1 pound-feet. And that's at 6,250. So again, it's not exactly a bottom end motor, this one. You get a 6-speed gearbox, chain drive, Traction control standard, 4 riding modes, slipper clutch, bi-directional quick shifter, all as standard. You also get a bunch of other features as standard. Cruise control, heated seat and heated handlebar grips, a 7-inch TFT display which features tyre pressure monitoring and basic navigation, it says, 2 USB sockets, a forward-facing 1080p camera, and a blind spot system which illuminates the light in the mirrors when there is something over your shoulder to be worried about, and the ignition's keyless. The equipment levels are pretty good. Pirelli Scorpion Trail tyres, ABS equipped Brembo brakes go on the 1990-21 and the 150-70-17 tubeless spoked wheels. So that's a combination that should make it a little bit more dirt friendly than some bikes in this class. The tank holds 17 litres, which isn't that much, but that may be an attempt to keep the weight down because it is a fairly hefty 238 kilograms, which is 525 pounds. I should have checked what weight the BMW is, but for comparison's sake. Seats fairly tall, 825 millimeters, 32.5 inches, but that does allow 190 millimeters of ground clearance. You get KYB, upside down front forks, and a single rear shock, offering around 190 millimeters of travel both ends. Touring equipment. The bike comes with auxiliary lights, crash bars, and aluminium panniers and top box. I'm not quite sure which of those are optional extras. So I know the panniers and the top box are. And if you want a 35 kilowatt version for an A2 license, then you can get one. Now they're arriving in the showrooms at a fairly modest £8,995. That's £3,000 cheaper than the BMW. And the UK distributors, MotoGP, they've recently taken over the Voge distribution. They've got 11 showrooms of their own and links with more than 300 others in UK and Ireland. So you should be able to find one fairly close to you. So, right, moving on to the final item of the day, we got to the in-depth piece I want to come back to. And the question I posed at the beginning is, what does Scotland have planned to reduce bike crashes? And the answer is it's not much different from what is normal. Now, I've been meaning to get around to this story for a while, but other things kept pushing it backwards. But it is based on the meeting minutes from Transport Scotland's Road Safety Framework Motorcycle Focus Group. There's a mouthful if ever there was one. Now, that was held back in March, on the 7th, in fact. I didn't get to hear about it until the minutes were released and they dropped into my newsfeed just before the beginning of April. But it's actually of interest if you were with me last Sunday when I talked about the problems of motorcycle crashes on the NC 500, the North Coast 500-mile route round the top of Scotland. Now, although the data from the focus group meeting refers to the whole of Scotland, I took what it tells us about serious motorcycle crashes on Scotland's road, and these are the sort of conclusions that I draw. Now, much of it will be familiar to anybody who pays attention to crash stats. The learning points for me, not in the order the data was actually presented to the meeting, which I thought was sort of scattergun irregularly, illogically. But anyway, the first thing, of course, is the usual. Motorcyclists are disproportionately likely to be injured or killed on Scotland's roads. Yes, we know that. And it's not necessarily because motorcyclists take more risks than car drivers. It's a significant factor is, of course, the fact we do not have the physical safety cage around us that a car driver has. So we will always come off worse when we crash in the same way as a car crashes. Now, second point, over the 5 years up to 2022, motorcyclists accounted for 17% of the fatalities, but less than 1% of the traffic. Now, interestingly, that seems to be a lower proportion, quite a lot lower, in fact, than is being stated for England, including some of the data provided by local county councils, where I've seen figures of 25, 30, even 40 times more likely. So it's that is an interesting figure. Now, of those who are injured, over 90% are male, And the most common age group, and this might surprise you, is the 50 to 60-year-old bracket. Now, that age demographic suggests that the crash rates are at least partly down to the influx of older touring riders. Um, my conclusion is supported by the next two data points, because motorcycle casualties tend to be more seasonal than other modes and more likely to occur on weekends. So, it may not be people who are from outside Scotland touring, but it's certainly likely to be riders from the big cities going out onto the lovely roads that there are in Scotland. And the second point that again allowed me to conclude that it's likely that it's touring riders who are stacking up these figures, because when you look at where those collisions and crashes happen, the data shows that they are more likely to occur on 60-mile-per-hour A-class roads. Now, the next few points are also quite interesting. In around a third of motorcycle injury collisions, the motorcycle was the only vehicle involved. Now, again, we've seen this before. Whilst the sort of urban Smithy collision is probably the most common crash of all in the UK, the crashes out on the open road do often only involve the motorcyclist, so motorcycle error. That's not to say that collisions between cars and bikes out on the open road aren't a factor. Often when the motorcyclist either appears around a blind bend to find a car turning at a junction that they haven't been aware of, or when the motorcycle runs into an oncoming vehicle having crossed the centre line, they are problematical. So the common contributory factors assigned to motorcycle crashes which involve injury are: first, loss of control; secondly, a poor turn or maneuver; and thirdly, that sort of nebulous one, failure to look properly. I've never understood what that means, and I would love to know what goes into that category. Now, motorcycles are more likely to be involved in injury collisions when going round bends than other vehicle types, particularly on higher speed limit roads. And I'll come back to this point in a moment when I talk about the perceptual markings that are being trialled on Scottish roads. But this is a statement of all of them that really caught my eye. Quote, "With regards to longer term trend of motorcycling fatalities since 1994, there have been many peaks and troughs, and we are still in the same position we were 30 years ago." So the road safety framework is calling for a 30% reduction in motorcycle KSIs by 2030. But they're saying that in 30 years, they've achieved nothing to get any kind of reduction in the casualty figures. So how are they going to go about that? What are they going to change? Well, we know about the prime markings. I have talked about those in the past. I have shown what those are all about. Those are a photo there taken straight from the research document, actually. They're being trialled north of the border. The project is currently in phase 2. This will run from last year, 2023, to 2035. And basically what they are designed as is a series of sort of painted gateways where riders are likely to ride through the gap rather than over the paint. And that helps put the rider in a correct position for the bend. And it also gives them a way of judging their speed coming up to the corner, which helps them brake. So the results, I know a lot of people have been very skeptical about these markings, but the results published by Professor Alex Steadman and his team that came up with this concept, they've been positive, with many riders recorded as changing their braking behavior, speed and positioning. And they say in particular, the corners where the markings are in place have seen reduced speeds and fewer run wide errors. If you want to download the full report, I have the link for you. It's you'll have to wade through it, of course, but it is an interesting read. Here it is. I think they've looked at video footage with about 300,000 riders on it. So, I mean, this is an enormous undertaking. For phase 2, the trial's being extended. Markings are being painted. at an additional 18 sites. And the plan is to extend the investigation into rider behaviour on right-hand bends as well as left-handers. So, okay, so far so good, but of course this still leaves uncounted tricky corners in Scotland which won't have these markings. You know, with a couple of dozen corners have the markings. There are, I can't even begin to guess how many there are. So what is the plan for rider safety generally? Well, I read on, and this is where we hit the same old story. The meeting heard that Police Scotland's rider refinement and enforcement safety campaign would be launched over the Easter weekend, with dedicated weekends throughout the year with increased activity. And priority locations and local engagement areas would be the focus for the campaign. And 2024 will see the use of more unmarked police motorcycles, which are allegedly, and I quote, assist in breaking down the barriers with regards to engagement with the motorcycle community. Now, quite frankly, how anybody can say that being tailed or even pulled over by an unmarked bike is engagement, I mean, that just beggars belief, really. And well, 30 years with no improvement, 30 years with no new ideas other than these prime interventions. And if we keep rolling out these same old interventions, I predict that in 2054, we'll be saying that we're still in the same position that we were in 2024. And the targets are trying to meet those ambitious reductions in motorcycle casualties. I'll be very much surprised if we actually manage any of that. Right, Terry's contributed. In the American SPN style networks, they always start by saying, looking out for the dancing girls cheerleaders. Okay, all right, I've not seen that one. I suppose you mean the so-called brolly dollies. High-speed motorcycle jousting. Well, yes, possibly. Terry, yeah, he also says, as always, levels of participation by different demographic groups will reflect in the crash figures, but doesn't necessarily make them statistically significant. Well, again, yeah, that's true. You have to do more than just count numbers of people falling off and then sticking them on a graph. You do have to know the numbers of riders involved. I think in this case, they were saying that the results are statistically significant. That it's not just counting numbers. There are actually more risks to older riders. Anyway, useful point. Reading the minutes would be helpful, and I'm sure that that item that I posted with the link to the prime markings research will probably give you some feedback on that too. Anyway, that brings me to the end of the show. So I will just remind you, if you possibly can, do think about supporting me via my coffee page. You can become a supporter or a subscriber, different levels of access to articles from the two different levels there. I'll also give you a shout out to last week's contributors. I've got to put this here somewhere. So where has it gone? Here we go. So thank you very much, Paul and Greg. They both booked 60-minute online coaching sessions. I said I'm slowly starting to break down some of the barriers to people thinking that online coaching doesn't work. Charles Kittle, Dave, Helen, Brian, and Anonymous. They have also helped support me. So thank you very much to all of those. Do pop over to my coffee page, have a look at it, and you'll find lots of stuff on that page. If you want to head there, the easiest way to do it is via the QR code, which has just gone up on screen. Just enter that onto your phone or whatever, and you'll be taken straight to my coffee page. And all you have to do is get your name up in lights. Here is to become a one-off supporter or a monthly subscriber. Now, that's it for today. So thank you very much indeed for watching. I very much appreciate it. We've got one more comment from Sue, who says thanks. So anything else to say? Don't forget that Elevenses will be back at the regular spot of 11 a.m. on Wednesday. And if you are out there on the bike today, enjoying what is at the moment still lovely weather down here in the southeast, I think I have a date with the lawnmower. But if you are out there on the bike, stay shiny side up, and then I will see you for the next show.